The conference room felt too small for the weight of the moment. I sat across from my sister Jennifer, watching as she spread the lawsuit papers across the polished mahogany table with theatrical flair. Her lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Harrison, wore the confident smile of someone who thought victory was guaranteed. "It's really quite simple," Jennifer said, tapping the documents with her perfectly manicured nail. "Dad wasn't in his right mind when he changed his will. The company should have gone to both of us equally, or better yet, to me entirely. I've been there longer after all. My name is Catherine Walsh, and at 35, I was watching my older sister try to steal our father's software company right out from under me, not knowing I'd spent the last 2 years building a case that would destroy her. 15 years at the company versus my 10, I replied calmly, though quantity of time doesn't always equal quality of contribution. Jennifer's smile tightened. "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" "Just an observation." I kept my tone neutral, careful not to show my hand. "You've certainly been busy during your time there." If she caught the double meaning in my words, she didn't show it. Instead, she turned to her lawyer with an exaggerated sigh. "See what I mean? This is exactly why Dad couldn't have been thinking clearly. Catherine has no idea how to run a business. She's too academic." The way she said it, like being thoughtful was a weakness, reminded me of all the times she'd dismissed my careful analysis in favor of flashier, riskier strategies. Strategies that, I discovered, often involved creative accounting. "The lawsuit is quite straightforward," Harrison interjected. "We have evidence suggesting your father was unduly influenced during his final months. The change in his will, making you sole heir to Walsh Technologies, appears suspicious given the circumstances." I raised an eyebrow. "What circumstances would those be?" "Your sudden interest in the company's operations," Jennifer cut in. "The private meetings with Dad. The way you manipulated him during his illness." The irony of her accusing me of manipulation almost made me laugh. Instead, I opened my laptop. "Would you like to see what those private meetings were really about?" Jennifer waved dismissively. "Your little spreadsheets and analysis reports. Please, this is about justice. About what Dad would have wanted if he'd been thinking clearly." "Dad was thinking very clearly," I said softly, especially after I showed him the audit results. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Audit. I typed in my password, pulling up files I'd spent 2 years compiling. It started with discrepancies in the international division's accounts. Small things at first, expenses that didn't quite add up, contracts with irregularities. But you know how I am, too academic, always digging deeper." Jennifer's confidence wavered slightly. "Those accounts were properly managed. I oversaw them personally." "Yes, you did." I turned my laptop toward her. "Very personally, from what I found. Especially the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands." The color drained from her face as she recognized the account numbers on the screen. Harrison leaned forward, frowning as he studied the display. "Ms. Walsh," he began, "what exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," I replied. "I'm stating facts. For the past 10 years, Jennifer has been systematically embezzling from Walsh Technologies. Small amounts at first, carefully hidden in international transactions. But it grew bolder over time, didn't it, Jen?" Jennifer stood up so quickly her chair rolled back and hit the wall. "This is ridiculous. You're making accusations without proof because you know you're going to lose the company." I clicked to the next file. "Here's proof. Every transaction, every hidden account, every fake vendor contract you used to funnel money out of the company. Dad saw all of this 2 years ago. That's what our private meetings were about, me showing him exactly how his trusted daughter had been stealing from him for a decade." Harrison was now looking at Jennifer with growing concern. "Ms. Walsh, if these allegations have any merit—" "They don't," Jennifer snapped, but her voice had lost its confidence. "This is just Catherine trying to distract from the real issue. Dad wasn't competent when he changed his will. We have doctors willing to testify." "Doctors you paid to say what you wanted," I finished for her. "Yes, I found those transactions too, along with the emails where you discussed exactly what you needed them to claim about Dad's mental state." Reaching into my briefcase, I pulled out a thick folder. "This is just a summary of what I've discovered. The full documentation has already been submitted to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're particularly interested in the international aspects of your schemes." Jennifer sank back into her chair, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. You're bluffing. You couldn't have tracked everything. I was careful. Not careful enough. I opened the folder, revealing page after page of detailed financial records. Did you really think I spent the last 2 years just letting you plot against me? Every time you moved money, I followed it. Every fake contract you created, I documented it. Every person you bribed or threatened, I recorded it. Harrison was now gathering his papers, his earlier confidence replaced by professional concern. I think we need to take a break and reassess our position. Good idea, I agreed. Though you might want to review your ethical obligations as an attorney, especially regarding the presentation of falsified medical evidence in a lawsuit. He paled slightly, nodding as he quickly packed his briefcase. Jennifer, we should discuss this privately. But Jennifer wasn't listening. She was staring at the documents in front of her, years of careful schemes unraveling with each page. How? She whispered. How did you find all this? You taught me well, actually, I replied. All those years of dismissing me as too academic, too detail-oriented. It turns out those qualities are pretty useful when investigating financial fraud. The aftermath of that meeting unfolded exactly as I planned. Harrison withdrew from the case immediately, unwilling to risk his reputation on a lawsuit built on fraudulent evidence. Jennifer, faced with overwhelming proof of her crimes, tried desperately to regain control of the situation. We can work something out, she said, following me to my office. Some kind of arrangement between sisters. I set my briefcase down, turning to face her. Like the arrangement where you stole millions from Dad's company while plotting to take it from me entirely. That money was just insurance, she insisted. I worked just as hard as you did. I deserved. You deserved? I cut her off. Let's talk about what you deserved. Dad gave you everything, the best education, the best opportunities, a high-level position in his company straight out of college. And how did you repay him? By stealing from him for 10 years. Her composure cracked completely. He always liked you better, always praised your analytical mind and attention to detail. I had to protect myself. Protect yourself. I pulled up more files on my computer. Is that what you call creating fake vendor companies to funnel money offshore, or bribing doctors to question Dad's mental competency, or threatening employees who noticed accounting irregularities? She paled at that last part. Who told you about the threats? Marcus in accounting, Sarah in legal. Pretty much everyone you tried to silence. I turned my screen toward her. They kept records, Jen. Emails, voicemails, text messages, all documenting how you tried to cover your tracks. The next day, the FBI arrived at Walsh Technologies with a warrant. I watched from my office as they escorted Jennifer out, her designer suit and perfect makeup a stark contrast to the handcuffs around her wrists. The investigation uncovered even more than I found. Jennifer's embezzlement totaled over $12 million, carefully siphoned through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. She'd been thorough in hiding her tracks, but my 2 years of investigation had unraveled every scheme. Your father would be proud, Agent Torres told me as we reviewed the evidence. This is one of the most comprehensive internal investigations I've seen. I thought about Dad's face when I first shown him proof of Jennifer's theft. The hurt, the disbelief, but also the recognition of why I'd spent so much time digging through company records. He knew what she was doing, I said quietly. Deep down, I think he knew. He just couldn't bring himself to believe it until I showed him concrete evidence. The criminal trial was swift and damaging. Jennifer, faced with overwhelming documentation of her crimes, accepted a plea deal. 15 years in federal prison, plus restitution of all stolen funds. But the real work began after her conviction. Walsh Technologies had taken a hit to its reputation, and employees were shaken by the revelation of such extensive fraud by a senior executive. I called an all-staff meeting the day after Jennifer's sentencing. I know the past few months have been difficult, I began, looking out at concerned faces. Finding out someone you trusted was stealing from the company. Watching federal agents walk through our offices, it's not what any of us expected. Marcus, the accountant who'd first noticed irregularities years ago, spoke up. What happens now? The company's reputation will be rebuilt, I finished firmly, starting with a complete overhaul of our financial controls. No more single-person oversight of international accounts. No more pressure to ignore irregularities. And most importantly, no more fear of retaliation for reporting concerns. Over the next year, I implemented every security measure and financial safeguard I had studied during my investigation of Jennifer. Each weakness she'd exploited became a point of strength. Each person she threatened became part of a new, more transparent management structure. The company didn't just survive, it thrived. Our reputation for financial integrity and ethical business practices actually brought in new clients, particularly those concerned about international compliance and transparency. 2 years after Jennifer's arrest, I received a letter from her in prison. Dear Catherine, I had a lot of time to think about what I did. To the company, to Dad, to you. I told myself I was just taking what I deserved, but the truth is I was jealous. You earned Dad's trust while I tried to steal it. I'm sorry. Jennifer. I filed the letter away without responding. Some betrayals go too deep for apologies to matter. That evening, I sat in Dad's old office, my office now, looking at his photo on the wall. He passed away 6 months after changing his will, secure in the knowledge that the company was in good hands. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Torres. Just got word. They found Jennifer's last hidden account. All stolen funds recovered. I smiled, thinking about how differently things might have turned out if Jennifer had succeeded with her lawsuit. Instead of exposing her crimes, I might have lost everything Dad had worked to build. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Sarah from legal entered, carrying a thick folder. The new compliance procedures you requested, she said, setting them down. And there's something else you should see. She pulled out a document, an old email thread she discovered during routine archiving. In it, Jennifer detailed her original plan to take control of the company dating back 12 years. She never intended to share leadership, Sarah said quietly. Even before she started stealing, she was plotting to push you out. I nodded, unsurprised. The lawsuit wasn't her first plan. It was just her last desperate attempt after everything else failed. Looking out over the city lights, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Jennifer had spent years underestimating me, dismissing my analytical nature as a weakness. She never realized that same attention to detail would be her undoing. The company quarterly meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. We would be announcing record profits, expanded international operations, with new, rigorous oversight, and a revolutionary software platform that would cement our position as industry leaders. All because Jennifer had tried to steal what was rightfully mine, never realizing that her own actions would prove exactly why Dad had made the right choice in his will. Sometimes justice comes not from confrontation, but from careful documentation, not from dramatic showdowns, but from years of patient investigation. Jennifer had wanted a quick victory through legal manipulation. Instead, she'd gotten 15 years to reflect on the consequences of underestimating her too-academic sister. As I reviewed the next day's presentation, my phone buzzed with another message, this time from Marcus in accounting. Year-end audit completed. Every account reconciled, every transaction verified. We've come a long way from where we started. Indeed, we had. From uncovering systematic theft to rebuilding a stronger company, from exposing betrayal to establishing new standards of integrity. Jennifer had tried to destroy what Dad built, but instead, she'd forced me to make it better than ever. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, its expensive cream envelope standing out among my stack of student papers. My father's law firm's logo gleamed in the corner, bringing back memories I'd spent 20 years trying to forget. Ms. Alexandra Mitchell, we are writing to inform you of changes to your parents' estate planning. I set the letter down, my hands trembling slightly. After 2 decades of silence, this was how they chose to communicate. Through their lawyers. My name is Alexandra Mitchell, though these days most people know me as Ms. Mitchell, founder of Bright Horizons Academy. At 42, I've built something I'm proud of, something that matters. But 20 years ago, I was just a disappointed daughter being cast out of my family for choosing the wrong career path. The memory of that night still burns clear in my mind. My father, Richard Mitchell, standing in his mahogany-paneled study, my teaching program acceptance letter crumpled in his fist. Teaching. He'd spat the word like it tasted bitter. We didn't pay for 4 years at Princeton so you could waste your life babysitting other people's children. My mother had stood silently by the window, her perfect posture and pressed silk blouse a testament to the privilege she'd married into. Think about what you're throwing away, Alexandra, she'd said softly. The connections, the opportunities. I am thinking. I'd replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm thinking about making a difference, about helping children learn and grow. Spare me the idealistic nonsense, my father had cut in. If you want to throw away your potential, fine, but don't expect us to support this phase. He torn the acceptance letter in half, letting the pieces flutter to his imported Persian rug. Choose now. Either join the firm as planned or leave with nothing. I'd chosen nothing. Now, 20 years later, I stared at the law firm's letter, wondering what could have prompted this sudden contact. I'd heard bits and pieces about my family over the years, mostly through old school friends. My father had expanded his firm, opened offices in 3 more cities. My mother still chaired the hospital board's charity committee. They'd written me out of their will years ago, a fact they'd made sure reached me through mutual acquaintances. Ms. Mitchell, my assistant Jenny, poked her head into my office. The parent council meeting starts in 5 minutes. I tucked the letter into my desk drawer. Whatever my parents wanted could wait. I had a school to run. Bright Horizons Academy hadn't started as a grand vision. After leaving home that night with nothing but a backpack and my savings, I completed my teaching certification and taken a job at an inner-city public school. The challenges there, underfunding, overcrowding, students falling through the cracks, had sparked an idea. What if education could be different? What if we could create a school that combined academic excellence with emotional intelligence, that taught not just subjects but life skills? It had started small tutoring sessions in my tiny apartment, then after-school programs in a rented church basement. I'd worked 3 jobs to save money, lived on ramen noodles and determination. My first proper classroom was a converted warehouse space with second-hand furniture and donated books. Now, 15 years later, Bright Horizons occupied a sprawling campus on the outskirts of the city. We had waiting lists 3 years long, revolutionary teaching methods being studied by universities, and most importantly, students who were thriving. The parent council meeting that morning was about our latest expansion plans. We needed more space, more resources to accommodate the growing demand. Parents sat around the conference table, doctors, business owners, community leaders, all united in their commitment to educational innovation. The new STEM wing will cost approximately $12 million, I explained, pulling up the architectural renderings. But it will allow us to double our science and technology programs. And the funding, Dr. Carter, one of our longtime board members, asked. I smiled. Already secured. The Mitchell Education Foundation has been busy. That was the irony my parents had never bothered to discover. While they'd been mourning their daughter's wasted potential in teaching, I'd built something bigger than they could have imagined. The Mitchell Education Foundation, funded initially through my tutoring income and eventually through grants and donations, had grown into a powerful force for educational change. After the meeting, I finally opened my father's law firm's letter completely. The language was formal, detached. Recent changes in your parents' estate planning necessitate a review of certain arrangements. Your presence is requested at a family meeting. Everything okay? Jenny asked, noticing my expression. I folded the letter carefully. My parents want to meet. After 20 years, she knew my story. Most of my staff did. It was part of Bright Horizons' origin story that I rarely shared the full details. Are you going to go? I glanced out my office window at the bustling campus below. Students hurried between classes. Teachers led outdoor discussions under shade trees. Life hummed with purpose and possibility. Everything I'd built without their help or approval. I think I have to, I said finally, if only to show them exactly what their wayward daughter has accomplished. That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence of my journey, awards from educational organizations, news articles about Bright Horizons' innovative programs, photos of graduating classes, hundreds of students who'd gone on to great things. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Maria. Heard about the meeting. Want backup? Maria had been there that night 20 years ago, had let me crash on her couch while I figured out my next steps. She'd watched me build Bright Horizons from nothing, had celebrated every milestone and setback along the way. I got this, I texted back. Time to show them what teaching can really achieve. I pulled out an old photo album, one of the few things I'd grabbed that night. In it was a picture of my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, the woman who'd first shown me the power of education to change lives. She believed in me when my own parents couldn't see past their expectations. My phone rang, the law firm's number. Ms. Mitchell, just confirming your attendance at Thursday's meeting. I'll be there, I said firmly, and please tell my parents to bring their estate documents. They might find them educational. As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the window. I wasn't that scared 22-year-old anymore, leaving home with nothing but dreams and determination. I was Alexander Mitchell, educator, innovator, builder of futures. Thursday's meeting would be interesting indeed. The law firm of Mitchell and Associates hadn't changed much in 20 years. The same mahogany paneling, the same oil paintings of stern-faced partners' pasts, the same air of old money and power. I stepped off the elevator in a tailored navy suit, my heels clicking against the marble floor with purpose. Ms. Mitchell, the receptionist greeted me, her eyes widening slightly with recognition. They're waiting in the main conference room. Of course they were. The main conference room, where my father always held his most important meetings. I played there as a child, drawing quietly in the corner while he negotiated million-dollar deals. I paused outside the heavy double doors, taking a deep breath. Through the frosted glass, I could see 3 silhouettes, my father, my mother, and someone I assumed was their lawyer. Alexandra, my mother spoke first as I entered, her voice carrying that familiar note of careful control. She aged well, her silver hair elegantly styled, her posture still perfect. You look successful. Hello, Mother. Father. I took a seat across from them, setting my briefcase on the polished table. Shall we discuss why I'm here after 20 years of silence? My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable for the first time I could remember. We've been reevaluating certain decisions. Indeed. I raised an eyebrow. And what prompted this reevaluation? Their lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, shuffled some papers. Perhaps we should begin with the formal aspects. Actually, I interrupted. I'd like to hear it from them. I looked directly at my father. Why now? He shifted in his chair, his legendary courtroom confidence nowhere to be seen. We saw the article in Forbes about Bright Horizons Academy. Ah, the article. America's most innovative educator. How Alexander Mitchell is revolutionizing private education. It had come out last month, complete with a detailed analysis of our $100 million endowment and growing national influence. Fascinating reading, my mother added quickly. We had no idea. No, you didn't, I agreed calmly. You were too busy being ashamed of my career choice to notice what I was building. Alexandra, my father started, but I held up a hand. Let me finish. For 20 years, you've had nothing to say to me. No calls, no cards, not even when Bright Horizons won the National Excellence in Education Award. Not when we opened our second campus, not when the governor appointed me to the state education board. I pulled out my tablet, bringing up our latest financial reports. Would you like to know what your wastrel daughter has been doing while you were pretending she didn't exist? Without waiting for an answer, I began presenting the numbers. Our annual budget, our expansion plans, our scholarship programs. The foundations we'd established, the lives we changed, the future we were building. The Mitchell Education Foundation currently manages assets of over $150 million, I concluded. We've sent over 3,000 students to college who might never have had the chance otherwise. And yes, Father, some of them even became lawyers. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. My father stared at the financial reports, his expression unreadable. Why didn't you tell us? He finally asked. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Tell you? You made it very clear that teaching was beneath the Mitchell family dignity, that I was throwing my life away. Why would I come back to report my success to people who couldn't see the value in education? We were wrong, my mother said softly. It was the first time I ever heard her admit to a mistake. We were so focused on the path we'd chosen for you, that you missed the path I chose for myself, I finished. The path that's helped thousands of students find their own way. The lawyer cleared his throat again. Perhaps now we should discuss the estate changes. I turned to him, my voice steady. No need. I've seen the documents you sent. You want to add me back into the will, make me a heir again now that I've proven myself worthy of the Mitchell name. My father leaned forward. Alexandra, please, we're trying to make things right. Make things right? I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder. These are the names of every student who's graduated from Bright Horizons in the past 15 years. Their stories, their achievements, their dreams. This is what making things right looks like. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Keep your money. I've built something far more valuable than your estate could ever be. Wait, my mother called as I reached the door. The gala next month, the hospital's annual fundraiser. Would you consider attending? As my guest. I paused, hand on the doorknob. Actually, I'm the keynote speaker. The hospital is partnering with Bright Horizons on a new medical education initiative. But you'd know that if you read past the first page of the Forbes article. Walking out of Mitchell & Associates felt different this time. 20 years ago, I left in tears, my dreams seemingly shattered. Now I left with my head high, knowing exactly who I was and what I'd achieved. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Jenny, emergency at school. Mrs. Thompson's advanced chemistry class accidentally created foam that's taking over the science lab. I smiled, already turning toward Bright Horizons. This was where I belonged, dealing with exploding experiments, inspiring young minds, building future leaders. But life has a way of surprising you. 2 days later, a package arrived at my office. Inside was my original acceptance letter to the teaching program, the one my father had torn in half. The pieces had been carefully taped together and framed along with a note. We saved it. Even when we couldn't understand your choice, some part of us must have known you would prove us wrong. We are sorry. And we are proud. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. That would take time, trust, and probably more than a few uncomfortable family dinners. It was acknowledgement of my choices, my success, my vision. I hung the framed letter in my office, next to our first student's college acceptance letter. Both represented the same thing, the power of believing in yourself when no one else does. The following week, I received another surprise. My father had nominated Bright Horizons for the city's Business Excellence Award. My mother had joined our parent advisory board. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. During our next board meeting discussing the new STEM wing, Dr. Carter mentioned seeing my parents at a recent education fundraiser. They couldn't stop talking about their daughter, the educational innovator, he said with a smile. Funny how things change, I replied, but I was smiling too. That evening, standing in front of my office window watching students leave for the day, I thought about legacy. My parents had wanted me to continue their law firm legacy. Instead, I built my own, one that would impact generations to come. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. A student, Emma, one of our scholarship recipients, stood there clutching a college acceptance letter. Ms. Mitchell, I got in, just like you said I would. I hugged her, remembering my own dreams at her age. I never doubted you for a second. After she left, I sent a text to my parents. Student just got into Princeton. Guest teaching has its moments. Their reply came quickly. Dinner this weekend? We'd love to hear all about it. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right. And sometimes the hardest people to teach are the ones who think they already know everything. I picked up my bag, ready to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to make a difference. That's what education is all about, not just learning from the past, but building toward the future. And my future? It was exactly where I'd always wanted it to be, in a classroom, changing lives, one student at a time. The hospital discharge papers felt heavy in my hands as I stared at my phone's banking app. Zero balance, every account drained, every investment liquidated. 3 months in a coma had given my brother plenty of time to dismantle my life. It's really for the best, Marcus said, lounging in the hospital room's visitor chair. You were always too cautious with money. Dad's tech company needed bold moves to stay competitive. I carefully folded the discharge papers, my movements still slow after months of inactivity, and those bold moves required my entire inheritance. While technically it was our inheritance, he smirked. I just consolidated the resources, made things more efficient. My name is Sarah Chin, and at 32, I was watching my brother justify stealing everything our father had left me. What Marcus didn't know was that during those 3 months he thought I was completely unconscious. My mind had been far from inactive. The car accident that put me in a coma had been bad. Multiple fractures, internal injuries, and severe head trauma. The doctors hadn't expected me to wake up at all. But while my body had been healing, my consciousness had existed in a strange state of semi-awareness. I could hear everything happening around me, even if I couldn't respond. And Marcus, convinced I was completely oblivious, had done a lot of talking. The medical bills were expensive, he continued, checking his new Rolex. Bought with my money, no doubt. Had to make some tough choices. But hey, you're alive, right? That's what matters. I looked at the medical bills he'd laid on my bedside table. Nearly $1 million in treatments and rehabilitation costs, all now my responsibility. He'd not only taken my inheritance but saddled me with debt. Of course, I said softly. Thank you for handling everything. He frowned slightly, probably expecting more resistance. Marcus had always been the aggressive one, the entrepreneur who burned through 3 startups before Dad finally gave him a position at Chen Technologies. I was the quiet one, the careful one, the one who'd actually earned her position as head of R&D through hard work rather than nepotism. What he'd never understood was that being quiet didn't mean being weak. During those 3 months of forced stillness, I listened to Marcus making calls, conducting meetings by my bedside, believing his comatose sister made the perfect confidant for his schemes. He'd laid out everything. How he'd manipulated the board, falsified documents, used my medical condition as an excuse to seize control of both our inheritances. But he'd made one crucial mistake. The company lawyers will need your signature on some paperwork, he said, pulling out a folder. Just standard stuff. Transferring your shares, acknowledging the debt consolidation. Formalities. I took the folder with trembling hands. The weakness wasn't entirely an act. 3 months in a coma takes its toll. Could you get me some water? My throat's still dry. The moment he left the room, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text. It's done. He brought the papers. Sarah, my best friend and corporate lawyer, no relation despite the shared name, replied immediately, recording everything. Keep him talking. Marcus returned with the water, setting it on the table with exaggerated care. Here you go, sis. Now, about those papers. Of course, I said, taking a small sip. But first, could you explain exactly what happened with the Mitchell contract? I'm still a bit fuzzy on the details. His eyes lit up. Marcus never could resist bragging. Oh man, that was brilliant. See, Mitchell Industries thought they were getting exclusive rights to the new quantum processing algorithm. But I managed to sell the same technology to 3 different companies. They all think they have exclusive deals. I nodded encouragingly, watching him dig his own grave. The quantum processing algorithm had been my project, my life's work. Dad had left it to me specifically because he knew how revolutionary it could be. And now Marcus was openly admitting to multiple counts of corporate fraud. But won't they figure it out eventually? I asked, my phone recording every word. He waved dismissively. By then it won't matter. I've already moved most of the money offshore. The company can take the hit. That's why I needed your shares. Had to have controlling interest to push it through. I see, I said quietly, and the medical bills. Why are they in my name when Dad's insurance should have covered everything? Marcus shifted slightly, the first sign of discomfort he'd shown. Well, there were some complications with the policy. Had to make some adjustments to free up capital for the deals. Adjustments, I repeated. Like canceling my coverage retroactively. Hey, business is business, he said, his tone hardening. Look, just sign the papers. Unless you want to try fighting the medical bills on your own. I picked up the pen, appearing to study the documents. One more thing. What happened to Dad's personal research files? The ones he kept in the home office. Marcus froze for just a moment, long enough to confirm what I'd suspected. During one of his bedside monologues, he'd mentioned destroying some problematic documents. Those old things probably got thrown out during the estate cleanup. Nothing important. I knew better. Those files had contained Dad's personal observations about the company, including his concerns about Marcus's business practices. Their destruction was just one more crime to add to the list. You're probably right, I said, positioning the pen over the signature line. Nothing important. Just then, my phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah. We've got everything. Don't sign anything. I set the pen down carefully. Actually, Marcus, I'm feeling a bit tired. Would it be okay if I reviewed these tomorrow? Everything's still a bit overwhelming. He frowned but couldn't very well force a recovering coma patient to sign legal documents. Sure, whatever. I'll come back tomorrow. Just, don't take too long. The board needs these processed quickly. After he left, Sarah slipped into the room, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. We got it all. Every admission, every detail. The fraud, the insurance fraud, the document destruction. Everything. I leaned back against the pillows, finally letting the exhaustion show. What's next? First, we get you out of here. My place is ready. Accessible bathroom, hospital bed, everything you need for recovery. Then she smiled grimly. We start dismantling everything your brother built while you were sleeping. That night, settled into Sarah's guest room, I thought about all the hours Marcus had spent by my hospital bed, arrogantly revealing his schemes to what he thought was an unhearing witness. He'd assumed my silence meant weakness, my stillness meant defeat. He'd forgotten Dad's most important lesson. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. I picked up my phone, sending one final text for the day, to Michael Chen, Dad's oldest friend and the head of corporate security at Chen Technologies. Time to wake up those dormant security protocols Dad put in place. Marcus took the bait. His response came immediately. Everything's ready. Operation Sleeping Beauty is go. I smiled, remembering Dad's code name for the contingency plan he created years ago, when he first suspected Marcus might try something like this. My convenient coma had given my brother exactly what he wanted, the perfect opportunity to show his true colors. Now it was time to show him mine. The next morning, while Marcus was undoubtedly preparing for another day of corporate fraud, I was meeting with a team of lawyers and investigators in Sarah's home office. My body was still weak, but my mind was sharp as ever. The recordings are damning, Michael said, playing selected clips from my hospital room. Marcus's voice filled the room, bragging about each illegal transaction, each manipulated contract. He basically confessed to everything. Sarah nodded, adding documents to an already substantial pile. We've traced the offshore accounts he mentioned. He wasn't as clever as he thought. Every transaction left a trail. What about Dad's insurance policy? I asked, reviewing the fraudulent medical bills. That's where it gets interesting, Sarah replied, pulling out another file. Marcus didn't just cancel your coverage. He diverted the policy payments into a shell company. The insurance was still active. He just rerouted the benefits to himself. I wasn't surprised. During his bedside monologues, Marcus had revealed his whole philosophy. Family is just another word for convenient resources. He'd seen nothing wrong with stealing from his comatose sister. In his mind, he deserved everything because he was smart enough to take it. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, Michael added. Marcus has no idea that half the board members have been quietly gathering evidence against him for months. Your father put some very loyal people in key positions. Dad had always played the long game. He'd known Marcus might try something like this eventually, which is why he built in so many safeguards. The dormant security protocols weren't just about protecting company data. They were about protecting the company from Marcus. What about the Mitchell contract? I asked. And the other companies he sold the algorithm to? Sarah grimaced. 3 separate companies, each thinking they had exclusive rights. The potential lawsuits could bankrupt Chen Technologies. Unless, Michael interjected with a slight smile, someone could prove that those contracts were signed under fraudulent circumstances by someone without proper authority. I nodded, understanding the plan. Because I never actually signed over my shares or my rights to the algorithm. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Everything Marcus did was technically illegal. Once we expose the fraud, all those contracts become void. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Where are you? Need those papers signed ASAP. I shoved the message to Sarah, who grinned. Perfect timing. Ready to set the trap? I texted back. At Sarah's house. Still too weak to travel. Could you bring the papers here? His response was immediate. Be there in 30. Don't make this difficult. Sis. While we waited, the team got into position. Federal agents hidden in adjacent rooms, recording equipment ready, every detail carefully planned. This would be Marcus's last performance as CEO of Chen Technologies. He arrived exactly on schedule, practically bouncing with impatience. Finally, look, just sign these and we can all move on with our lives. I sat in a wheelchair, partly for effect, partly because I still couldn't stand for long, looking through the papers slowly. It's a lot to take in, Marcus. Maybe you could explain exactly what happened while I was sleeping. He launched into his practice speech about making necessary business decisions, protecting company interests, consolidating resources. Each word was another nail in his coffin. And the quantum processing algorithm? I asked innocently. The one Dad specifically left to me? How did that end up being sold to multiple companies? Marcus froze mid-sentence. How did you know about that? I finished for him. It's amazing what you can hear in a coma. People say all sorts of interesting things when they think no one's listening. The color drained from his face as realization dawned. You were awake. Not exactly awake, I corrected, but aware enough. Aware enough to hear every call, every meeting, every confession about what you were doing with my inheritance. He recovered quickly, his arrogance returning. Doesn't matter. It's your word against mine. And who's going to believe the memories of someone who was in a coma? That's a good question, I said, nodding to Sarah. She pressed a button on her laptop, and Marcus's own voice filled the room. Mitchell Industries was easy to fool. Same with the others. They all think they have exclusive rights. By the time they figure it out, the money will be safely hidden away. Marcus lunged for the laptop, but the federal agents chose that moment to enter. Marcus Chen, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and insurance fraud. You can't do this, he snarled as they handcuffed him. I'm the CEO. I run this company. Actually, Michael said, stepping into the room, as of this morning, you don't. The board voted unanimously to remove you, pending criminal charges. All your recent deals are being investigated, and the offshore accounts have been frozen. As they led him away, Marcus turned to me one last time. This was all a setup. The whole time? Not the coma, I said quietly. Not the accident, but everything after, your choices, your actions, your crimes. Those were all you, Marcus. I just made sure someone was paying attention. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and corporate restructuring. The companies Marcus had defrauded were surprisingly understanding once we explained the situation. Many of them had dealt with Dad and knew his reputation for integrity. The medical bills were reversed once the insurance fraud was exposed. My inheritance was recovered from the offshore accounts, along with substantial damages. Chen Technologies not only survived but thrived once the truth came out. 6 months later, I sat in Dad's old office, my office now, looking at a framed photo on the wall. It showed our family years ago, before greed and ambition had corrupted Marcus's heart, before he decided that family was just another resource to be exploited. Sarah knocked on the door, carrying a thick envelope. The final sentencing report. 15 years, no possibility of early parole. The judge was not impressed by his family-first offense. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Has he said anything? Just that he never thought you had it in you, that you were always the quiet one, the careful one. I smiled, remembering all those hours in the hospital, listening to Marcus unknowingly confess his crimes. Sometimes being quiet is the best way to hear what people are really saying. The company moved forward, stronger for having survived Marcus's betrayal. The quantum processing algorithm, properly developed and legally licensed, revolutionized the industry. Dad's legacy was not only preserved but enhanced. And Marcus? He had plenty of time in federal prison to think about the sister he'd underestimated. The quiet one who'd turned his own arrogance into evidence. The careful one who protected not just her inheritance, but the company's future. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about being still, being patient, and letting people reveal exactly who they are. Dad would have appreciated the irony. He'd always said that success wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room, it was about knowing when to listen. And I had listened, right up until the moment it was time to speak. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as I stood in the center of the Ashworth Mansion's grand ballroom, surrounded by Boston's elite. My engagement ring caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across my champagne glass. Everything was perfect, until I saw Marcus's face. He was striding toward me, his jawline tight with anger, holding his phone like a weapon. Behind him, his mother Victoria watched with barely concealed satisfaction. You lied to me, he said, his voice carrying across the murmuring crowd. All this time you've been lying. My name is Emma Crawford, and at 28, I was about to learn just how quickly a perfect life could unravel. Marcus, I said quietly, what are you talking about? He thrust his phone in my face. On the screen was my old LinkedIn profile, the one I deleted months ago. Stanford Business School, a master's in finance. You didn't even finish community college. The room went silent. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, judging, waiting for my response. My hands started to shake. I can explain. Explain what? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. How you convince everyone you were some brilliant financial analyst when you're really just a secretary? How you wormed your way into my life, into my family's company? Victoria Ashworth stepped forward, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. I knew something wasn't right about you, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. No one from your background could possibly be what you claimed. I looked around the room, at the faces of people who'd supposedly become my friends over the past year. They all wore the same expression, a mixture of shock and smug vindication. They'd never really accepted me, the outsider who'd somehow caught the heir to Ashworth Investments. Marcus, please, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Let's talk about this privately. Oh, now you want privacy. He grabbed my left hand roughly, pulling at my engagement ring. After humiliating me in front of everyone? After making me look like a fool? I yanked my hand back, but he'd already gotten the ring off. Tiffany's finest 5 carats of flawless diamond, now looking oddly small in his clenched fist. The wedding's off, he announced to the room. I can't marry someone who built our entire relationship on lies. He turned back to me, his handsome face twisted with contempt. Did you really think you could pull this off? That no one would discover the truth? The truth, if only he knew what that really meant. While you've been playing dress up, he continued, pretending to be something you're not, I've been seeing someone else. Someone real. Someone who actually belongs in this world. A tall blonde stepped out of the crowd. Amanda Porter, head of client relations at Ashworth Investments. She took Marcus's arm, a triumphant smile on her face. Amanda has an actual MBA, Marcus said, from Harvard. She understands business, understands our world. Unlike you. I stood there, feeling the weight of every judgment, every whispered comment, every sideways glance I'd endured over the past year. But underneath the humiliation, something else was building, something that felt a lot like freedom. You're right, I said quietly. Marcus blinked, clearly thrown by my calm acceptance. What? I did lie. I took off my shoes, Jimmy shoes that had cost a month's salary, and held them in one hand. I'm not who you thought I was. Victoria's triumphant smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the hysterical reaction they'd expected. But neither are you, I continued. You're not the brilliant businessman you pretend to be. You're just a trust fund kid playing with daddy's money. Marcus's face reddened. How dare you? How dare I? I laughed, and this time it was genuine. You know what's funny? I actually felt guilty about my lies. About pretending to be less than I am to protect my real work. But you? You've never felt guilty about anything in your life, have you? Confusion crossed his face. What are you talking about? I smiled, thinking about the email I'd received just that morning. The one confirming that everything was in place. You'll find out soon enough. With that, I turned and walked toward the door, my bare feet silent on the marble floor. Behind me, I could hear Marcus's voice, higher now with uncertainty. Where are you going? Home, I said without turning around. To my real life. The drive back to my apartment was surreal. The city lights blurred past as I remembered how this had all started 1 year ago. I built my company, Phoenix Capital, from nothing, working my way up from actual secretary to CEO through sheer determination and a knack for spotting market trends others missed. But I kept myself anonymous, using a series of proxies and holding companies to hide my identity. In my experience, being a young woman in finance meant constantly fighting to be taken seriously. Then came the rumor that Ashworth Investments was vulnerable. They'd over-leveraged themselves on some bad investments, and their old-school approach was failing in the modern market. They were ripe for a takeover. I needed to verify the rumors to understand the company from the inside. So I created a new identity, the ambitious but slightly fraudulent Emma Crawford, who faked her credentials to get a job as an executive assistant at Ashworth. What I hadn't counted on was Marcus. He'd noticed me my first week, asked me to lunch, and seemed charmed by my supposed attempts to better myself through night classes. One lunch led to dinner, dinner led to dating, and suddenly I was engaged to the heir of the company I was planning to acquire. I told myself I'd end it before it went too far, that I'd find a way to let him down gently once I had the information I needed. But part of me had actually started to care for him, to hope that maybe he'd understand when the truth came out. Tonight had proven how foolish that hope had been. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my real apartment, not the modest one Marcus thought I lived in. Inside, I kicked off my fancy dress and pulled on comfortable clothes, then sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. A new email was waiting. Miss Crawford, all preparations are complete. We can begin the acquisition process whenever you give the word. James Morton, Legal Department. I thought about Marcus's face when he'd thrown my lies in my face, about Victoria's smug satisfaction, about Amanda's triumphant smile. I began to type, Mr. Morton, begin immediately, and make sure the initial offer comes through our Singapore office. I want the Ashworths to have no idea who's really buying their company until it's too late. Emma. I sat back, looking at the city skyline through my window. Marcus thought he'd expose my lies tonight, thought he'd put me in my place. He had no idea that in 6 months he'd be working for me, if I decided to keep him on at all. My phone buzzed with a text from my Chief Operating Officer, Lisa. Saw the society page update about the engagement. You okay? I smiled, thinking about what was to come. Better than okay, I replied. Everything's going according to plan. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. Below, Boston's financial district glittered like a carpet of stars. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably celebrating with Amanda, thinking he dodged a bullet by exposing his gold-digging fiancé. Let him celebrate. In 6 months, he'd learn what it really meant to lie about who you are. 6 months passed like a perfectly executed business plan. I sat in my private office on the 45th floor, reviewing the final acquisition documents for Ashworth Investments. Everything had gone exactly as planned. Our Singapore office had made the initial offer, followed by increasingly aggressive moves through various subsidiaries. The Ashworths never saw the pattern until it was too late. They're here, Lisa announced from my doorway. In the main conference room. I checked my reflection in the window. Power suit perfect, hair elegant but understated. Not a trace of the woman Marcus had humiliated half a year ago. How does he look? I asked, gathering my papers. Lisa smirked. Like someone who just realized he's lost his family's company and has no idea who he lost it to. The walk to the conference room felt like destiny. Through the glass walls, I could see them. Marcus, his father Richard Ashworth, Victoria, and their team of lawyers. They all wore the same expression of barely contained panic. I paused outside the door, remembering Marcus's words from that night. Someone real. Someone who actually belongs in this world. Well, time to show him just how real I could be. I pushed open the door, and the room fell silent. Marcus's face went from confused to shocked to pale with recognition. Victoria grabbed his arm so hard her knuckles went white. Good morning, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. I'm Emma Crawford, CEO of Phoenix Capital. I believe we have some papers to sign. This is impossible, Marcus sputtered. You were a secretary? I smiled. Actually, that was the only real lie I told. Well, that and the community college story. I do have an MBA from London Business School, not Stanford. I just kept it quiet while I was researching your company. Richard Ashworth leaned forward, his face red. This is some kind of joke. We're not selling our company to a woman you thought was a social climbing fraud. I opened my folder, sliding documents across the table. Actually, you are. The board approved the sale last week. These are just the final formalities. Victoria found her voice. Marcus, did you know about this? Did you tell her things about the company when you were? He didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. I cut in. Your company's weaknesses were obvious to anyone paying attention. Overleveraged positions, outdated investment strategies, a complete failure to adapt to modern markets. I looked at Marcus. Though your son's tendency to brag about board meetings over dinner did provide some useful confirmation. Marcus slumped in his chair, the full weight of what had happened finally hitting him. The whole time you were playing me. Not initially, I admitted. At first, I just needed to verify some rumors about Ashworth's financial position. But then you and your mother made it so clear that someone like me couldn't possibly belong in your world. Well, I decided to show you exactly what someone like me could do. This is outrageous, Richard blustered. Our lawyers will. Your lawyers have already reviewed everything, I cut in smoothly. The sale is legal, binding, and final. The only question is whether you want to make this transition smooth or difficult. I turned to Marcus. Remember Amanda? Your real businesswoman. She's been working for me the whole time. Those client lists she's been compiling, that data she's been analyzing, all feeding directly to Phoenix Capital. The look of betrayal on his face was almost comical. Almost, you'll never get away with this, Victoria hissed. Once people know. Know what? I asked calmly. That you lost your company to the woman you publicly humiliated. That your son's ex-fiancé outmaneuvered your entire family? Please feel free to share that story. I'm sure the financial press would love it. The room fell silent. Even the lawyers looked uncomfortable. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Ashworth Investments will become a subsidiary of Phoenix Capital. Your clients will see no disruption in service. Your employees' jobs are secure, except for the senior management team, of course. They'll be restructured. Marcus's face went even paler. You're firing me? Think of it as a learning opportunity, I said. A chance to start from the bottom, prove yourself on merit rather than birthright. Isn't that what you always claim to respect? The next hour was a blur of signatures and legal formalities. The Ashworths signed everything put in front of them, their fight completely gone. When it was done, when their family century-old company officially belonged to me, I stood up. One last thing, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the engagement ring, the one Marcus had yanked off my finger 6 months ago. I believe this belongs to you. I set it on the table in front of him. Consider it a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. As they filed out of the conference room, Marcus lingered behind. Why? He asked quietly. Why go through all of this? You could have just bought the company. I looked at him for a long moment. You know, the night we met, you told me that the key to success was knowing your true worth. You were right. I just don't think you ever understood what that meant. After they left, Lisa brought in champagne. To the new owner of Ashworth Investments, she said, pouring 2 glasses. I took mine, but didn't drink immediately. You know what the funny thing is? If they just treated me with basic respect, if they hadn't been so convinced that someone like me couldn't possibly belong in their world, I probably would have structured this as a merger instead of a takeover. Their loss, Lisa said firmly. Though I have to ask, any of it real? With Marcus? I thought about it. Parts of it were. I think that's what made it hurt when he showed his true colors. But in the end, he proved exactly why this had to happen. Why companies like Ashworth need to change or die. Later that night, I stood in my office, looking out at the city. The press release would go out in the morning. Phoenix Capital acquires Ashworth Investments in historic deal. There would be speculation about my age, my gender, my qualifications, but none of that mattered anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I get it now, why you did it. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Some lessons don't need acknowledgement. Instead, I opened my laptop and began working on plans for Ashworth's restructuring. The company had potential. It just needed new vision, new leadership, new understanding of what really creates value in today's world. As I worked, I thought about that night at the engagement party, about standing barefoot on marble floors while Boston's elite sneered at my supposed deception. They thought they were witnessing my greatest humiliation. Instead, they've been watching the beginning of my greatest triumph. Sometimes I realized the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about rising so far above those who doubted you that they're forced to look up and see exactly what they missed. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere out there, a family of Boston blue bloods was coming to terms with the fact that their carefully ordered world had been upended by the very person they dismissed as unworthy. I smiled, raised my glass to the skyline, and got back to work. After all, I had a company to run, 2 companies now actually, and this was just the beginning. The day started like any other. I was making coffee in our modest kitchen when James walked in, dressed in his best suit, a smug smile plastered across his face. Something was different about him. There was an air of arrogance I hadn't seen before. Sarah, we need to talk, he said, adjusting his expensive new watch. A recent purchase I hadn't questioned. I should have. What's on your mind? I asked, already knowing what was coming. The late nights at the office, the secret phone calls, the sudden interest in looking more executive. It all made sense now. I'm leaving you for Emily, he announced like he was sharing great news. She's the CEO of Morton Industries. Unlike you, she's actually going somewhere in life. I'm tired of being married to someone who can't match my ambitions. I took a sip of my coffee, hiding my smile behind the mug. James had always been ambitious, but his ambition was matched only by his ignorance. My name is Sarah Chen, and for the past 5 years, I've been married to a man who thought he knew everything about me. The truth? He didn't know the first thing about who I really was. Emily's different, James continued, pacing the kitchen with animated gestures. She understands the corporate world. She's not stuck answering phones and filing papers like you. Do you know she made over $8 million last year? I set my coffee down carefully. Is that what she told you? He scoffed. I've seen the reports, Sarah. I'm not an idiot. She's shown me everything. The company finances, her personal accounts. She's offering me a position as vice president of operations. Can you imagine? Me, a VP. I could imagine it quite well, actually. After all, I had been the one to suggest to Emily that we might have an opening in that department. Of course, James didn't know that. He didn't know that Emily Morgan, the supposed CEO of Morton Industries, was actually just the face of the company. The real owner? That would be me. What about our life together? I asked, more curious about his response than actually concerned. 5 years of marriage just gone. Let's be honest, he said, straightening his tie. We've been going nowhere. You're content being a secretary, making what? 40,000 a year. Emily makes that in a week. She has vision, connections. She's taking the company global. I bit back a laugh. Morton Industries had gone global 3 years ago, long before Emily was even hired. I had orchestrated that expansion myself, working late nights in my home office while James assumed I was just catching up on filing. The truth was far more complex than James could imagine. 10 years ago, I inherited Morton Industries from my grandfather, who built it from the ground up. But he taught me something valuable before he passed. The best way to understand your company is from the ground up. So I worked my way through every department, learning the ins and outs of the business. When I finally took over as owner, I made a decision. I would remain anonymous, using a public face for the company while I kept working among the employees. Emily was hired specifically for this role, to be the public CEO while I maintained control from behind the scenes. She was good at her job, playing the part of the powerful executive perfectly. What I hadn't expected was for her to fall for my husband's obvious attempts at seduction. When are you leaving? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Tonight, he said, pulling out his phone to check the time on his new Rolex. Another gift from Emily, no doubt. Emily's arranged for movers to come for my things. We're moving into her penthouse in the city. My penthouse, actually. One of several properties I maintained for business purposes. I suppose congratulations are in order, I said, standing up to rinse my coffee mug. I hope you find what you're looking for, James. He paused, clearly thrown by my calm reaction. That's it? No fighting, no begging me to stay. Would you like me to beg? I asked, raising an eyebrow. No, He trailed off, frustrated by my lack of emotion. I thought you'd care more. I care, I said softly, just not in the way you think I should. He shook his head, that familiar look of condescension crossing his face. This is exactly why I'm leaving. You have no ambition, no fire. You're perfectly content being nothing more than a secretary for the rest of your life. If he only knew, I had spent the last 5 years building Morton Industries into a global powerhouse, doubling our revenue and expanding into new markets, all while he thought I was just pushing papers around a desk. You know what your problem is, Sarah? He continued, warming to his theme. You're afraid to take risks. Emily, she takes what she wants. She's a real businesswoman. I smiled, thinking about the meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. You might be surprised about what I'm capable of, James. He laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. Right. Well, I got to go. Emily's expecting me for lunch to discuss my new position. Don't worry about the divorce papers. Our lawyers will handle everything. Our lawyers. He had no idea that the prestigious law firm Emily had recommended was actually on retainer with Morton Industries with me. As he turned to leave, something made him pause. You know, I did love you once, but people grow, they change. I need someone who can keep up with me. I understand completely, I said, walking him to the door. Good luck with everything, James. I mean that. He gave me one last patronizing smile before walking out, probably thinking he was leaving me devastated and alone. Little did he know, he had just walked right into a trap of his own making. I waited until I heard his car pull away before pulling out my phone. Emily? Yes, he just left. Time to set everything in motion. The next morning, I arrived at Morton Industries early, taking my usual spot at the reception desk. I watched as James strutted through the lobby, nodding condescendingly at me as he passed. He was wearing a new suit, probably bought with the company credit card Emily had given him. Right on schedule, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. Board meeting in 30 minutes. Everything's ready. I smiled, thinking about what was about to unfold. James had no idea that he was about to learn the true meaning of ambition. The boardroom at Morton Industries was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. A massive mahogany table that could seat 30 and state-of-the-art presentation screens on every wall. James sat near the head of the table, next to Emily, practically glowing with self-importance. I slipped in quietly, taking my usual spot in the corner where I would normally take minutes of the meeting. James didn't even glance my way. To him, I was invisible, just another part of the office furniture. Emily stood, commanding the room's attention. Good morning, everyone. Before we begin today's regular agenda, there's an important announcement. James straightened his tie, clearly expecting his promotion to be announced. The smirk on his face made my stomach turn. As you know, Emily continued, Morton Industries has been going through some significant changes. Today, we have a special guest joining us. She paused, looking directly at me. Ms. Chen, would you like to take over? The confusion on James's face was priceless as I stood up and walked to the front of the room. He looked between Emily and me, his brow furrowed, trying to understand what was happening. Thank you, Emily, I said, my voice clear and confident. For those who don't know me, I'm Sarah Chen, the owner of Morton Industries. The color drained from James's face. He gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles turning white. Some of you may know me as Sarah from reception, or Sarah from HR, or even Sarah the secretary. For the past 5 years, I've worked in various positions throughout this company, learning every aspect of our operations from the ground up. I clicked through to the next slide, showing our latest quarterly results. Under this management structure, we've seen unprecedented growth. Our global expansion has exceeded all projections, and our profit margins have doubled in the past 3 years. James was shaking his head slowly, his mouth slightly open. I could see him putting the pieces together, all those late nights I spent catching up on filing, the mysterious business trips Emily took that always seemed to coincide with major company decisions, the way employees at all levels seemed to respect and defer to me despite my supposedly lowly position. However, I continued, recent events have brought to light some concerning behaviors that need to be addressed. I clicked to the next slide, displaying a series of expense reports. In the past month, we've documented numerous instances of unauthorized use of company resources. James's eyes widened as he recognized the charges. His new suits, the Rolex, the expensive dinners he'd been enjoying with Emily. Emily Morgan has been an excellent face for Morton Industries, I said, nodding to her. She's played her role perfectly, including the recent operation to expose potential corporate espionage and fraud. Emily stood up, moving away from James. Mr. Chen here has been attempting to gain access to confidential company information through, let's say, personal means. She placed a folder on the table. Every conversation, every promise of position and power, every attempt to access restricted data has been documented. James jumped to his feet. This is ridiculous. Emily, what are you doing? We had an agreement. No, James, Emily replied calmly. You had an agreement with the person you thought I was. My real agreement is with Morton Industries and Sarah. I could see him crumbling, his perfectly constructed world falling apart. Sarah, he said, turning to me, his voice taking on a pleading tone. You can't. This isn't. Can't what, James? Run a multi-billion-dollar company, make executive decisions, keep up with your ambitions? I kept my voice level, professional. I've been doing all of that and more while you were busy looking down on me for being just a secretary." The board members watched in silence, many of them hiding smiles. They'd known my true identity all along, had worked with me directly on major company decisions while maintaining the illusion for security purposes. As of this moment, I continued, "You are terminated from Morton Industries. Security will escort you from the building." I nodded to the two guards who had entered quietly during my presentation. "The police have also been notified about the unauthorized use of company funds. They'll want to speak with you about that." "You can't do this," he sputtered, his face red with rage and humiliation. "I'm your husband." "Actually," I said, sliding another folder across the table. "As of this morning, that's no longer true either. These are divorce papers, James. Everything's been arranged. Given the documented evidence of your attempted corporate espionage and fraud, I don't think you'll want to contest anything." He stared at the papers, then at me, then at Emily. The realization of how completely he'd been outplayed finally seemed to hit him. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Mr. Chen," one of the security guards said firmly, "please come with us." As they led him out, I turned back to the board. "Now, shall we discuss our actual quarterly projections?" The meeting proceeded as normal after that, though I could see the impressed looks on the board members' faces. They'd known I was capable, but watching me handle James had shown them another side of my leadership. Later that evening, I sat in my real office, the CEO's suite on the top floor, looking out over the city. Emily knocked and entered, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "Well," she said, handing me one, "that went even better than we expected." I took a sip, savoring the moment. He made it easy, really. His ego was always his weakness. "Still," Emily said, sitting down across from me, "it couldn't have been easy, watching him dismiss you all those years, knowing what you really were." I thought about it for a moment. You know what the funny thing is? He always talked about ambition, about being something more, but he never once tried to really understand the business from the ground up. He just wanted the title, the corner office, the prestige. "And you?" Emily asked, though she knew the answer. "I wanted to build something real," I said, looking at the city sprawled out below us. "My grandfather taught me that to really lead, you have to understand every aspect of what you're leading. That's why I worked my way through every department, why I kept my identity hidden. I wanted to see the company for what it really was, not what people would show a CEO." Emily raised her glass. "Well, here's to building something real, and to men who underestimate women in the workplace." I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. I almost feel bad for him, almost. "Don't," Emily said firmly. "He got exactly what he deserved." Later that night, as I walked through my penthouse, the one James had thought belonged to Emily, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Not because I'd gotten revenge, though that was certainly satisfying, but because I'd stayed true to my principles. I'd built something real, something lasting, while James had been chasing shortcuts to success. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer, "Divorce papers filed. Given the evidence, he's not contesting anything. It's over." I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow the business papers would run the story. Morton Industries owner reveals identity, exposes corporate espionage attempt. My PR team had already prepared the press releases emphasizing the company's commitment to security and ethical business practices. But tonight, I just stood there, enjoying the quiet satisfaction of finally being able to be myself completely. No more hiding, no more pretending to be less than I was. James had wanted someone who could match his ambitions. He just hadn't realized he was married to someone who had already surpassed them. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to trade up for someone he thought was more successful, he'd lost everything to the woman he'd looked down on all along. It was a lesson in humility he wouldn't soon forget. As for me, I had a global company to run, this time from the top floor where I belonged.